our first speaker is Dr. Lydia Lynch. Dr. Lynch is a lecturer of medicine at Brigham and Women's Hospital, who will be presenting her work, investigating a metabolic basis for sex differences in the immune system. Dr. Lynch.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rexroad, and for that amazing keynote by Dr. Maney. It was so helpful. Let me see, how should I do this? Yeah. Okay, so thanks again for the opportunity to present at this symposium as well. I'm going to be talking about our interest in sex differences in immunometabolism. And we're interested in sex differences in immunity, specifically immunometabolism, because we did exactly what Dr. Maney just mentioned at the end. We went back and we looked at some of our past data that we had done in different models, and we seen, major sex differences, sometimes we had only done them in males and then we repeated them in females and we found it was different. So this, we wanted to get to the bottom of this, and this is sex differences in immunity is highlighted recently in this article by The Conversation. Who's stronger? It's often noted that females have a stronger immune system, and this might be why we have more autoimmunity, but also we have better protection, perhaps from infection and cancer, compared to males. And this was recently seen, for example, or suggested in the COVID fatalities that was coming worldwide. And it wasn't so much in the older age groups where age was more important, but more in the young age groups where males were had more mortality from COVID-19. And so we really don't know, despite a lot of sex differences in the immune system, we really don't know the basis of them. But there has been a lot of suggestions. It's environment or stress or hormones, and most of the literature suggests it's hormones. But despite the obvious differences in the immune system, sex differences in immunity, immunology is ranked as the highest of the disciplines that doesn't consider or report sex in most publications. And so I think that Janet Rich Edwards' phrase, a literature of contradictions, is really very relevant to immunity. And so it's not here, but it's not on this picture here by Sabra Klein, but we suggest that metabolism or fundamental sex differences in metabolism might also account for sex differences in immunity. And so our hypothesis is there's differences in that, a lot of them are known in whole body metabolism or different metabolism in different organs and cells, and this might underlie some sex differences in immunity. And so first of all, we started to study this in mice in the metabolic core that I'm a director of at the Brigham. And Amanda went back and looked, the co-director, went back and looked at all the data that we had put through from the wild type mice that we've put through the metabolic cages. And we have many. So here we're comparing 60 males and 60 females, or 68 females. And what everybody knows is males are heavier than females. And so at room temperature, you have an increased metabolic rate in males. But this is not that evident at thermoneutrality. And so because metabolic rate is dependent on body mass, we need to account for that. And so when you do the ANCOVA, we actually find that there is no difference, fundamental difference in whole body metabolism, or metabolic rate, should I say, between sexes, because it's due to increased body mass in males. But there's some less known differences that came out, and that was the differences in substrate utilization. So if we look at RER, respiratory exchange ratio, which is the measure of whether the body is using lipids or carbs, there's a circadian rhythm to it. Mice are burning carbs when they're eating food at night and burning lipids when they're asleep. And we see that there was an increase burning of lipids in female mice at thermoneutrality. So when we put the mice at thermoneutrality, which takes away the adaptive thermogenesis that they're using to keep warm, we seen much more sex differences were revealed. And so it wasn't that the females started burning more lipids, it was that when males go from room temp to thermoneutrality, they turn off lipid burning, whereas females didn't. And as a result, what we think, there's a slight difference in core body temperature in mice at room temperature, but there's a significant difference or a significant increase in core body temperature in females at thermoneutrality. And this is at all times of the day. And this is recently published in Nature Metabolism, showing that housing mice at thermoneutrality better reflects what's happening in humans, because there's many species differences disappear when you put mice at thermoneutrality. And we know in humans that females are also have an increased core temperature. This was first shown in 1940, when, even though the language was a little bit strange in modern day, this was kind of ahead of its time. It was a study that was showing that not just due to politeness alone should we also consider females in studies, but that they're actually physiologically different. And so here's a more recent study which looked at a lot of males and females and found that, this is core temperature. If you draw a line down here, you see that females are shifted to the right. So also in humans, females are hotter, and this is diminished a little bit with age. And so why is this important for an immunologist like me? Well, because body temperature influences immunity. So the higher the body temperature, the more effective the immune response. This is seen in fever or subfebrile temperatures. When the body temperature is raised, the immune system is more effective. And so we wonder if this is part of the reason that females may have a more active or a more effective defense against pathogens and cancer. So the other aspect of this is that now we know that the immune system, or that the metabolic metabolism inside immune cells is also very important for immune cell function. And so Jacqueline Klein in my lab, she's just joined the lab as a PhD student, and she's going to work on this. Is there an immune cell metabolism difference between males and females, just like there is at the whole body level? And here she's just looking at mitochondria and CD4 T cells, and you can see that this is mitochondrial mass versus mitochondrial potential. There's a lot more mitochondria and mitochondrial potential in female T cells compared to males. And it's not, this is only preliminary data, but it's not just T cells, it's all lymphocytes. So here, if we see that this is females at thermoneutrality, as you go from room temperature to thermoneutrality, you also increase the immune cells themselves, increase their metabolism. And then we can measure this by seahorse in a live metabolic flux assay, and we see that just like they have more mitochondria, they seem to have more mitochondrial activity. And this is important because the more mitochondrial activity you have, the increased function that immune cells have. And so this is an ongoing work, but we do see that female T cells have more activation markers when they've been activated, or have greater delta in their activation compared to males. And so back to this question, if I have time, I'll just go through this very quick. What is the mechanism? And so here we collaborate with David Page through the SCORE Whisper Fund. We were able to look at these features in the SRY mice, where you have regular control mice, but you also have female, gonadal female that are XY and gonadal males that are XX. And so this has allowed us to decipher the contribution of SRY versus sex chromosomes to this, to first of all, core temperature. So here we see when we put mice from female mice from, these are our mice that I showed you earlier, from room temp to thermoneutrality, females become hotter, and they're also hotter to begin with. We also seen this in the XX females from MIT, and we've seen this in the XY females. So when the absence of SRY was what was causing this increased body temperature, and also the further increase in body temperature with thermoneutrality, whereas this wasn't seen in any of the male mice. We also seen that if you activate T cells, they upregulate their activation markers, and the activation of T cells was greater in females than males. And we also see that this was due to the absence of SRY. So the ongoing work is you know, this was what Jacqueline has just started. This is her PhD project, and she has one of the lightning talks if you want to hear more. So the question for her, a part of her PhD, is does sex differences in systemic metabolism, and here I'm really talking about core temperature and increased beta oxidation, lead to enhanced cell intrinsic metabolism in T cells? And then does this confer improved immunity in females in the models of immune challenge that we've seen sex differences in, for example, in cancer models in the lab and infection models? So
Thank you so
thank you.
much.